I work as a priest in the East End of London, as our friend just said, and I have found it in some ways quite difficult to persuade my congregation of the need for greener practice. And I think that's partly because of the cost. Sometimes greener practice is perceived as being more expensive, and sometimes it's perceived as not being as efficient. But let's start from the start. What is the role? First of all, to talk about the importance of ecological issues, I think. We had a lovely Old Testament reading about Jonah and the whale in church a few weeks ago, and one of my colleagues linked that with the story of someone who, diving off the coast of Australia, had found himself in the mouth of a whale, if you can imagine that. Thankfully, he got out very quickly, and but it affected him profoundly. Of course, it changed him. He realised something of what Jonah, all those years ago, had been thinking, had been experiencing. And so I think the first thing is about working the ecological principles, the principles of caring for the earth, and being very careful in our stewardship of all God's resources, to work that in to our formal speech, so sermons and that sort of thing, but also and perhaps just this afternoon, I've been writing a piece for our local paper, and I was sure to put in something there about the importance of caring for creation. So that's the first thing, talking about it, making it known, giving it reason, suggesting to people why it's a good idea. I said right at the beginning, it's not easy. There are competing priorities, and we saw in COP26 how some of the countries of the world said, but we can't do without this or that of the other resources of the world. We can't live without them. And so the importance of working that sort of thing into our conversation and into our formal speech, I think that's the first thing that leaders do. We have a strange and peculiar gift, most of us, I think, in that we are offered an opportunity to speak to our congregations, and perhaps these days via Zoom and Facebook and or YouTube and all sorts of other things, to a huge array of people all over the world. So the first thing is to talk about it. But of course, the other thing is the other side of that. It's no good talking about it if we then don't enact what we've talked about. And I think it's really important for leaders to be seen to be caring and careful of the world and all its resources, so that we can begin to help people to understand, for example, how important was our walk each day during the worst of the lockdown. Suddenly getting out, being able to hear the leaves rustling in the trees, seeing the children play on the grass, the dogs and cats running about and enjoying the freedom. All those things we realise were important to us. And that, I think, is what happens. By actually doing it, we begin to realise, A, the importance of it, but B, the cost. So how can we convince our people of the importance? in the Bible, both the Old Testament and the New, there's a great deal said about the resources of the world and how God has given us them to us to enjoy, to appreciate, to make the most of. I understand that there's a Jewish story that says that one day we'll get to heaven and God will say, please God, and God will say to us, what did you do with the gifts I gave you? So, what will we say? How have we used those gifts, both the personal ones of talking and using our opportunities to enact our faith, and the resources that are in this world? How have we used those gifts that God has given us? I think if we consider things like, how are we heating our place of worship? Are there ways that we could make that more efficient? Now, having said that, as as a minister within a team where one of our churches was actually built in 1172, I can tell you that that's not always easy. And although, of course, huge thick walls mean that actually the heating that we can produce inside lasts for quite a long time. But what do we use for cleaning? Do we use products which are beneficial to the world about us, or at least which don't hurt it? Or are we using products which, well, they may give off fumes and they may be dangerous when they're discharged into the water system, but hey, no, we can't do that. We've got to actually act it out, what we've talked about, haven't we? That's the importance of a leader. And of course, then you have that wonderful, I love Lao Tzu. I don't know if that's the correct way to pronounce it, but a philosopher hundreds of years ago who said a good leader is the person who, when the task is finished, when the work is done, the people say, we did this ourselves. So, of course, it's not only a question of imparting the importance of the use of our natural world, but it's also the importance of acting it out and helping and enabling others to act it out too, to see that what's good for us is generally what's good for the world. What's good for the world is so often what's good for us. And thus, I believe we will, as leaders, have made some impact on the very dangerous situation in which the world is as far as climate change is concerned. We have a very special role, and I hope and pray that we will use it.